Chapter 2. Thumbs up or down. Does he like it or not? There is only one thing worse than a man who doesn't have strong likes and dislikes, and that's a man who has strong likes and dislikes without the courage to voice them. Tony Randall. So, have you ever been in a meeting with someone but found yourself unable to determine what's going through her head? Has someone you know had an unusual experience but won't tell you what she thinks about it? When you explain a new strategy to a coworker, he barely says a word. What is he thinking? This chapter will teach you how, in similar situations, to quickly and discreetly discover what a person is really thinking, sometimes without saying a single word. Technique 1. The ghost image. When you write a message down on a notepad and tear off the sheet, have you ever noticed what happens? Usually, the message is still legible on paper underneath. The indentation of the pen causes the message to remain even after you remove the top sheet. The process is analogous to our technique because all of our experiences leave an impression on things around us and can create a conditioned response. Let's explain. Do you remember the lessons learned by Russian scientist Pavlov? In short, the dogs he worked with salivated when he walked into the room. The dogs had learned Pavlov's appearance meant they would be fed soon and therefore associated Pavlov with food, even without the presence of food. The example is referred to as conditioned reflex, and we have many examples in our own lives. For instance, maybe the smell of cut grasses brings back fond memories of your childhood, or anytime you meet someone with a certain name, you have unpleasant feelings towards them because of a former experience with a person of the same name. Memories are anchors. An anchor is an association or link between a specific set of feelings or emotional state and some unique stimulus, an image, sound, name, or taste. By associating the current situation with a neutral stimulus, a person's true feelings attach themselves to the stimulus. In a classic 1982 study, Gerald Gond paired one pen color with pleasant music and another pen color with unpleasant music. The two pen colors, blue and beige, are used in the experiment with similar positions. Gone split the subjects of the experiment into separate groups and showed them both the blue pen and the beige pen paired with pleasant music, in this case, the Grease soundtrack, or unpleasant music, in this case, the classical Indian music. At the end of the experiment, the subjects were told they could keep one of the pens as a gift. By a 3.5 to 1 ratio, the subjects picked the pen paired with the music they preferred. Another study illustrating the same conditioning phenomena was conducted at the University of Warsaw in 1985. During the study, students were interviewed by a researcher and then asked to state their name and birth order. Whenever a subject asked what birth order means, the interviewer lambasted the student for his ignorance or reacted neutrally by merely answering the question. The students were further instructed to go into another room and hands a piece of paper to not whichever researcher is not busy. Both researchers in the room were not busy. However, one researcher physically resembled the interviewer. An astounding 80% of the subjects who had been scoffed at chose the researchers who did not resemble the birth order interviewer. Alternatively, about 45% of the subjects receiving the neutral response choose the look alike. With this technique, we apply the same psychological process by pairing the situation with a neutral stimulus and merely observing his feelings towards the stimulus. If he becomes more attracted to it, you know he has a favorable impression of what was previously unknown. Conversely, if he displays an unusual dislike for it, you know unpleasant feelings are transplanted from the original source. For example, you are a mediator working to resolve a dispute between two parties. After extensive negotiations, you are having trouble reading both of them. On the desk are several blue pens. After the meeting, you ask both parties to individually sign several preferably unrelated documents, eliminating the possibility of individual preference or unnecessary consistency over the course of few minutes. The parties give the pen back to you each time. Each time you ask them to sign, you offer a choice between a black and blue pens. Assuming the pens are equally desirable, the party consistently choosing the black pen probably has a negative association with the blue pen and unfavorable feelings about the previous discussion. However, the party overwhelmingly picking the blue pen presumably has positive feelings associated with the pen and favorable impressions towards the meeting. The psychological strategy can be used with a variety of paired associations, giving you a strong statistical edge in fishing out a person's preference. For example, a person is listening to your presentation. You are both seated in blue chairs. Afterwards, he is taken to a new room with a round table and four chairs, two blue and two grey. If he has a favorable impression of the talks, statistically speaking, he is more likely to choose the blue chair over the grey one. Anytime the person is attracted to the stimulus present during the situation in question, we assume his impressions was positive. In contrast, when a person is repelled by a previous neutral stimulus, we assume he has unfavorable impression. Before we continue with more technique, let's look at the couple of highly reliable signs to a person's true thinking. Signal 1. First impressions. Dr. Paul Ekman, psychologist and leading lie detection expert, points out a clue to the true feelings in the form of microfacial expressions, emotional responses reflecting a person's true feelings. The expressions flash across a person's face too quickly for most to see, and the person quickly adjusts his expression to give off the desired impression. You need not worry about the videotaping the scenario. While you may not be able to detect the initial emotional response, the fact that a new one appears is evidence of a mask of his true feelings. Whatever impression he is exhibiting now, if his expressions took a while in coming or changed from some time else, then assume it is not genuine. Ekman points out most people are not aware of the micro expressions since they appear before they can be morphed and probably before the person experiencing the emotion is even aware of the emotion. Signal 2. The unconscious spills. The use of pronouns can reveal a fascinating insight into someone's true thoughts and feelings. A statement content analysis is a system that examines the use of pronouns such as I and we. For example, it is unusual for victims of abductions, sexual batteries, and other violent crimes to refer to the offender and victim as we. Instead, in recounting narratives involving the crime, the victim usually uses the personal pronoun I to refer to himself and he or she to refer to the offender. The use of the personal pronoun we involves a psychological closeness not typical in a crime. For example, a friend is telling you about her night out with her boyfriend. Her story is pepped with one word we. We got to the club at 10 o'clock. Then we had a drink. We met some of his friends. Then the narrative changes to he took me home. You can rightly assume there was a dispute of some sort between your friend and her boyfriend, since she moves to a less intimate recounting. For example, we drove home, we went home, we left, and so on, would more likely indicate a harmonious ending. Many applications of this psychology exist. For instance, when a person is confident and believes in what he is saying, he is more likely to use the pronoun I, we, or us. When we feel less strongly, we unconsciously seek to distance ourselves from our remark and do not attach ownership to our words. If you ask your boss what she thinks of your new idea and she responds by saying, I like it, you have a bigger probability of truthfulness. If she says, it's nice, you did a good job, she does not take ownership of her sentence and may not believe in what she is saying. It is important to remember that all signs must be examined within the context of the situation, and we should avoid a definitive conclusion based upon isolated signals. Quick take. A component to graphology, that is handwriting analysis, looks at the distance between the pronoun I and the next word to help determine the author's true feelings. If the distance is greater than the spacing between other words, we assume there is an unconscious attempt by the writer to distance himself from the statement. Additionally, if the pronoun is smaller or lighter, then there is reason to believe the writer is conflicted or outright does not believe firmly in what he is writing. Technique 2. All the world is a reflection. It is often said that a person looks at the world as a reflection of himself. If he sees the world as a corrupt place, he feels at some level, albeit probably unconsciously, that he is corrupt. If he sees honest working people, that is often how he sees himself. As the saying goes, it takes one to know one. Out of the blue and with no real evidence, if someone thinks you are up to something, ask yourself, why is he so paranoid? In a psychological terms, this is referred to as projection. Projection is why the con artist is the first one to accuse another of cheating. If you are constantly being questioned about your motives or activities, the accusations should set off alarm bells in your mind. How often do we hear of a jealous boyfriend constantly accusing his girlfriend of cheating on him, only to have her find out he is guilty of everything he has been accusing her of doing? The methodology is applied in the following way. If you ask someone if he is an honest person, he may simply lie and say yes. However, if you were to ask if he thinks most people are honest, he is free to give his opinion without concern for your ascribing the quality to him. A window into his soul? Not exactly. Transparency is obviously a concern. You want to make sure he will not know what you are really asking. Therefore, we use the tentative property to draw out his true feelings without arousing suspicion. In mathematics, the transitive property of equality is illustrated by if A is equal to B and B is equal to C, then A is equal to C. Let's say you want to find out if a person is in a happy marriage. Of course, simply asking outright is not a mind reading technique, nor can you be assured of accuracy. Therefore, we use the following system to more specifically pinpoint his feelings without running the risk of transparency or anomaly. Using correlated information, one or two steps removed from the original question, you can penetrate his real attitude without him thinking he is giving away his true feelings. The question is, are you happy in your marriage? The primary correlated statistic is people who are happy in marriage are grateful for their spouse. The secondary correlated statistic is a person who is grateful for his spouse tends not to take advantage of her. The question asked is, do you think taking advantage of your spouse is simply part of marriage? If he responds by saying yes, this is a red flag, though certainly not conclusive, that he may not be thoroughly happy in marriage, as he is taking advantage of his spouse, feels she takes advantage of him, or both. Naturally, coming up with the right correlation is essential. There is no hard and fast formula. It is not foolproof, but it does bend the odds in your favor. Some correlations are statistically oriented, while others are simply common sense. Let us see another example. A defense attorney wants to find out whether a potential juror is for or against the death penalty. if he cannot ask directly or worries he cannot be sure of the truthful answer if he does ask. He uses a correlated fact. Statistically speaking, a person who is for the death penalty is against gun control. Now he simply asks the juror if she is for or against gun control. If he believes the question is still too transparent, he can further correlate it with a question such as, do you think gun manufacturers should be held responsible for the misuse or abuse of their products? Accordingly, he assumes that a person who supports gun control is likely to believe gun manufacturers have a greater degree of liability than someone who does not support gun control. Thus, the technique gives you a greater insight into the person's true thinking, and combined with other techniques in this section can help you to know what is really going on in his head. Technique 3, the language lessons. Language powerfully impacts how we perceive and consequently feel about what we hear. Good salesperson know they should suggest to a customer, okay the paperwork instead of sign the contract. Beware when a person uses a euphemism, an expression intended by a speaker to be less offensive or disturbing to the listener than the word or the phrase it replaces. For example, the military understands the influence of words on attitude and behavior. People are more comfortable hearing about a military action than a war, even though the term means the same thing. We would rather hear about collateral damage than civilian property and lives being accidentally destroyed. Casualties are easier to swallow than deaths, and friendly fire is preferred over hearing we shot at our own forces. In everyday life, we do the same thing. We may refer to the toilet size bathroom, the powder room, the men's room, or the ladies' room. Indeed, we would rather tell our insurance company of the fender bender than use the word collision. And of course, letting an employee go or telling him he is being laid off is often the preferred language over being fired. So, what is the practical application here? In a subtle way, sometimes even unconsciously, the language a person uses reveals if he is concerned you will not like, accept, or believe the news. After reviewing Theresa's proposal, her supervisor declares, your idea is interesting, thought provoking, or nicely written. Without any follow up, Theresa can assume he did not like the proposal. Of course, a person's style of communicating, among other variables, must be taken into consideration. However, absent any other information and in conjunction with one or two other techniques in this section, you will gain a much greater insight into the situation. Usually a person will directly say what he means unless he has a reason to deviate. Let's examine another scenario. Fred's new girlfriend mentions she stopped by to see someone with whom she was friendly some time ago. If she had said dated, as was the case, Fred could assume not much is going on. Her decision to use a euphemism means she believes Fred would not take kindly to her whereabouts or she is not revealing the larger picture. Technique 4, positive markers. In the previous chapter, we spoke about using negative markers. Remember gum chewing and alcoholism? To find out if someone's up to something, here we use positive markers to detect whether a person has a favorable or unfavorable impression about something. For example, after 2 meetings with a new law firm, Ryan wants to find out how interested the firm is in him. Therefore, he may say, I would be really excited about working for a firm that has a passion for pro bono work instead of treating it an obligation. Now, Ryan gauges the response. If the other person elaborated on the firm's commitment to pro bono work and supports his own personal commitment, there is a good chance the firm is very interested in Ryan. However, if he goes right by points or offers a light agreement, they are less likely to be interested to him. He may be wasting his time.
To make the technique work, the marker should be something subjective, allowing the person the option of attaching himself to the marker or ignoring it.